Good afternoon, Bermuda. I hope you and your families, loved ones, and friends fared well during yesterday's winter storm. I wish to take this opportunity to extend my thanks to the Director of the Bermuda Weather Service, Dr. Mark Gashard, and his team for keeping us abreast of all of the developments of the deteriorating weather conditions throughout yesterday and last night. The critical information provided allowed us to make the right and necessary decisions to ensure that residents were kept safe. Throughout the day, we have been assessing the effects of the winter storm. And here's what and at this point, I'm going to ask Dr. Gashad if he would give us a brief weather update.
Uh, many thanks, Minister, and especially for the Greta test. It's certainly a team effort at the Bermuda Weather Service and the Bermuda Airport Authority and our partners around the island to bring the weather information in a timely manner. So I just want to extend that thank you onwards to my team as well. We're still in the process of compiling some of the data, but I can certainly give you a bit of an update by way of a critique of the forecast. The forecast of this event was particularly well captured by the numerical weather prediction models up to a week in advance of this storm's passage. And closer to the time of the closest approach to Bermuda, the prediction of the fine details such as the minimum central pressure, timing of the highest winds, and the frontal passage was all pretty well represented by the operational models that we use at the Bermuda Weather Service for forecasting. Now, as I mentioned, that data processing and compilation of information is still ongoing, but I do have some preliminary data to give the viewers here today. The winter storm did in fact produce storm force winds and hurricane force gusts locally. In some areas where enhancement of the wind was possible from the western exposure, such as Fort George Hill in St. George's, Commissioner's Point and Dockyard, winds did approach hurricane strength of 64 knots, with gusts of even 75 knots or more. The highest readings from trusted instruments are as follows, and I'll just read these out as a list of 4 or 5 of them. At LF Wade International Airport, the maximum sustained winds were 45 knots, that's 45 knots, and with peak gusts of 65 knots. The old heliport near the causeway, 52 knots with a gust to 71. Bermuda Radio, Bermuda Maritime Operations Center at Fort George and St. George's, 63 knots was their peak wind, sustained wind, and they had peak gusts of 76 knots, and that's the highest wind speed that we're from a trusted source at the moment. Out over the marine area, over the reef, Crescent on the northern reef from the maritime navigational aids, they had a maximum wind of 53 knots, that's 53 knots, and a peak gust to 71. So we certainly did have storm force winds and hurricane force gusts. The duration of those strongest winds seemed to last until about 4 a.m. local time before starting to noticeably drop off. And again, for more westerly exposed locations, those strongest winds lasted for another hour or so before dropping. During the evolution of this particular event, changes in wind direction meant that each individual exposure changed over time, meaning if you have a property that is exposed to the west or to the north, you would have felt that ramp up in wind speed noticeably as the winds shifted around from southwest to northwest. And this is particularly evident from data shared by Maritime Operations Center from their Fort George Hill instruments. There's much more I could say, but as I said, the data collection and compilation is ongoing, and we are compiling a post-mortem short report for release wider going forward sometime next week. So I'll leave it at that for the moment, but I'll say thank you once again and hand it back to you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gashad, for that very detailed analysis. I'm also joined this afternoon by Mrs. Kelly Burgess from our Durham team. I would just like to start with saying again that there was minimal structural or foliage damage, and most of the restoration works have been completed. Belco continued to work on restoring power to the small pockets of residents who are without electricity. Government offices resumed regular operations today. All flights are operating per normal today, and this evening we're expecting to welcome additional vaccines from the UK on the British Airways flight. All schools primary, which was without electricity this morning. Power has since been restored to the school, and in class learning at Paget Primary will resume on Monday. As a particular note, Cedar Bridge students and teachers conducted remote learning today as the school was being used to shelter our vulnerable persons. Regarding the government shelter, I can advise that 17 males and 2 females were housed during the storm. The shelter will remain open until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, and we are encouraging any of our vulnerable persons who wish somewhere warm to stay this evening. Please make your way to the shelter at Cedar Bridge as the weather conditions continue to be severe. Regarding public transportation, main throughway commuter service resumed this morning. There are still some road obstructions that are being cleared, and the Department of Public Transportation will update accordingly on those affected routes. The ferry service remains suspended. The vaccine centers opened from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. today, but will be resuming their regular schedule on Monday of 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And lastly, trash collection is per normal, and the Tynes Bay public drop off and the Marsh Folly composting facility are operating their regular hours should residents wish to dispose of any waste or debris. And partner agencies who ensured that we were ready and prepared for any eventuality. I also wish to commend our disaster risk reduction and mitigation team who worked throughout yesterday and last night to assess the progress of the storm and coordinate emergency responses. And of course, I need to commend the people of Bermuda who exercised care, caution, and common sense during the storm by staying inside and securing their homes to prevent any serious injury and damage. We've been advised by the Bermuda Weather Service that the current weather conditions are expected to continue throughout the weekend, and in that regard, persons should continue to exercise extreme caution when moving about the island, especially those persons who are on motorbikes. Thank you and be safe.
Thank you, Minister. We'd like to open it up for questions. Oh, and you can stay seated. It's fine.
My first question will be to Dr. Gishard. You mentioned earlier we had some figures about the wind speed. Do we have any information about the waves that occurred during the storm? Any accurate wave heights that were actually reported? Dr. Gishard?
Thanks for the question. If I understand it correctly, sorry, it was a little garbled. It was about whether we have any wave information. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. So unfortunately, there is no wave buoy in Bermuda to give us verified measurements of wave action on the island. And unfortunately, there are no tide gauge data available as the NOAA tide gauges appear to be out of service. To verify the presence or absence of storm surge. However, we have seen some anecdotal reports from around the island that indicate that a surge had developed in the persistent northwesterlies, and some low-lying areas around the fringes of Hamilton Harbor have in fact suffered from some slight inundation. We have noted that from posts online.
All right. And this one, I guess, would be for the minister. Were there any reports of damage around the island but caused by the storm? I mean, obviously, we've heard about some power lines going down, but we haven't heard of anything else. Have you heard of anything different?
There have been very minimal reports of any damage, and we're very thankful for that. I did receive something earlier today about a tree being down up in Warwick Parish, but other than that, we were blessed, and the damage has been minimal.
And do you think anything can be learned from this experience? Obviously, things went fairly well, but obviously, there's always room for improvement.
I definitely agree with you on that one, Owen. What we do is we generally have a debrief after every event, and we talk about things that worked and what didn't work, and what areas we can improve in.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Owen from the Royal Gazette. That concludes today's press briefing. Thank you for joining us today, and we wish you all a safe weekend. Thank you.